mainstream are in meltdown because Biden's censorship powers are being blocked. So why is it they want to censor us? Is it because they want to protect our health, or is it because they want to protect their authority? Hello there, you 6.5 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom, a voyage that is even now being prevented from unfurling by censorship powers that Biden don't want blocked. Even though a federal judge has said you can't keep telling social media companies to censor information on a whim, they're saying we're only doing it to protect the people. Those people that we protect and serve. Why? What other motivation could there be? Could it be that democracy primarily operates at the behest of big business, corporation, financial interests, globalism? No, surely not. Say it ain't so. Let me know in the comments. Do you believe they're acting on your behalf to protect you from health conditions, or do you think they're trying to protect you, as Biden and Karine Jean-Pierre claim? Let's see how the mainstream media responded to the horrific news that the Biden administration can't censor you at whim because it's against the First Amendment.
Just reading the words in this injunction, a, quote, massive effort by the defendants to suppress speech based on content, those are the judge's words, calling the present case, quote, arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in the United States history, Ellie.
Yeah. It's a dramatic decision by this judge. If you read through it, he's citing to literature and George Washington and Ben Franklin.
Yeah, who cares about those guys and what they thought? What relevance have Ben Franklin and George Washington got to American legislation and history? I barely remember their names anymore.
Here's what really is astonishing to me. This is a conservative ideology that clearly comes through in this decision.
People are genuinely unaware of their own ideology, aren't they now? It's like, oh, that's someone else's ideology. And what are you basing that on? My own ideology, of course. Otherwise, it would be invisible to you. Where we have to get to as discerning, awakening wonders together is, oh yeah, that's an ideology and that's an ideology. I'm not neutral. I prefer one ideology. They prefer another ideology. And in order for me to have this ideology, perhaps they are to be afforded that ideology. Now, when it comes to a fundamental principle like free speech, you have to, I think, be rigorous. That's why we've made the decisions as a movement that we've made in the last few years. We recognized where this was going. Hang on a minute. If they can censor information without consent, without democracy, how are we going to be able to have conversation? As the ideology changes, they're going to censor in accordance with that ideology. If there's a pandemic, they're going to use that to legitimize censorship. If there's a war, they're going to use that to legitimize censorship. They're going to use it all the time to limit, prohibit, control debate. We cannot allow that to happen, can we? Well, one side wants it. So when you're making a measurement and a judgment between the two sides, and you know me, I don't agree with any of the occupants of that system. I think ultimately they share the same interests. They're interchangeable. George W. Bush, now fated and adored. Obama, adored by both sides. For me, the answers are not coming out of those institutions. But the principles, the principle in particular, the one that we're discussing now, free speech, is vital, indefatigable, incontrovertible, non-negotiable.
It's a conservative political ideology, right? We saw some of the quotes questioning vaccines, questioning masks, conservative talking points.
Yeah, and there's no questions there. Let me know in the comments if there were any questions that should have been asked, could have been asked, weren't asked because of censorship, and that turned out to be actually an infringement of your free speech.
But the ruling itself is the opposite of judicial conservatism. This is one of the most aggressive, far-reaching rulings you'll ever see.
That's amazing. This is propaganda live. You're watching propaganda live. This is aggressive. This is not judicial. Wait a minute. I think they're referring to the Constitution and legislation that's in your Constitution and saying, hold on, this is against stuff that we've agreed we were never going to do. And that we can't just change it without changing the entire Constitution. Because free speech means people are allowed to say what they want. There are other crimes. Don't incite violence. Like, those are all covered by other laws. But if people are going, oh, excuse me, I wonder if we could see some data, that's free speech. That's within free speech.
What this judge is purporting to do is to micromanage, really, the day-to-day interactions between essentially the entire executive branch, all these agencies that are listed as defendants, and the leading social media companies. And in the actual temporary injunction, the judge basically says, you're not allowed, administration, to talk to these social media companies about any protected free speech except for cybersecurity threats, national security threats, criminal threats.
That's exactly what it should be, isn't it? Unless it's a national security threat or there's crime, either cyber or literal, mind your own business. No one elected you to control their ability to communicate. Remember, what's being suggested here is that there's a parental relationship between the state and subjects, which is what we use in the UK. Subjects. You're subject to rule. You're pushed down by rule. Now, you might like your parent. You might love mummy or daddy, but you're an adult. You should be able to decide for yourself what you read, what you consume. This is the assumption. People are idiots. If you give them a load of information, they won't be able to determine for themselves truth from fiction. They get all carried away and do lally, and they'll start believing in stuff that we don't want them to believe in. Now, if you want to live like that, you should be allowed to go and live in a community of we're the community where we're controlled, please. You know, if you want, you can carry on with lockdowns. If you want, you can stay in your house now. If you want to carry on wearing masks forever, wear masks forever. You can do what you want, but don't tell other people what to do and say. That's what's being proposed here. Now, I'm astonished that that's a partisan issue, that's either right or left. How dare he say, this is micromanaging the government? How dare you micromanage the government while they micromanage everything we say, while they shut down, in the words of Zuckerberg, debatable or true information?
Asked for a bunch of things to be censored that in retrospect ended up being more debatable or true.
That's exactly what it was. They were micromanaging. They were scrutinizing individual tweets. Did you have any idea what the Twitter files revealed? They revealed that they were scanning all data. Have you any idea what Snowden revealed? They're looking at all of your information and data, and if they don't like it, they remove it. And if they don't like you, one day they'll remove you.
But where's the line? Who's going to police this?
Yeah, who is going to police this? Not the government, plainly, because no one trusts them. Not the mainstream media, plainly, because no one trusts them. There has to be a new way of organizing society. That's what's being revealed here.
This is a judge trying to micromanage the day-to-day regular activities of the entire executive branch. I don't know that it's actually policeable by the judge, but it's really an astonishing. I don't mean this necessarily as a criticism. This is a very activist judicial opinion.
If you watched that and it was an aesthetic that wasn't familiar to you, forgive the simplicity of the terms, but if it was on Russia Today or Al Jazeera, something that had cultural paraphernalia that was different, they were talking a different language, they were wearing religious dress that wasn't common to your country, broadly speaking, you'd go, oh, that's propaganda. They're saying, how dare you micromanage the government? This is activism. You would recognize it for what it is, propaganda. That's propaganda. That's CNN. Look at how CNN is funded. Look at how CNN packages up your data. You know, when we do a commercial for you, it's plain and evident that we are doing a commercial. We have partners that help us so that we can exist outside of that business model. This is why we have sponsorship partners, because the alternative is to become a propagandist unit for the globalist corporatist state. That's why we're grateful to have partners like Incogni, who actually, what they do, I think is valuable. They're looking at how your data is being tracked and observed. Like when you see how the mainstream media behaves, can you really believe that your data is safe? Of course it isn't. In our country, this June, a data breach in the UK exposed over 100,000 innocent people working for British Airways, the BBC, other companies. That data leak included personal information, contact details, and even banking information. We know that stuff's going on now, don't we? And unfortunately for all of us, these leaks are becoming more common, with the nefarious activities of hackers leading to data being ransomed or sold to data brokers. These data brokers then sell on your information for some serious profit. But listen, you have the right to remove your data from the data broker's records. This is where our sponsor, Incogni, comes in. Incogni is a service that reaches out to all the data brokers to request that your personal data is removed, and it's automated so you don't have to do anything except create an account with Incogni by clicking the link in the description, give Incogni permission to remove your data, wait to be notified about all the brokers and email lists you've been removed from. You'll see it in real time. They'll go, we removed you off all these things. It's quite satisfying, actually. I've done it, and you go, oh my God, I didn't even know I was on these. The first 100 of you that go to the link in the description, incogni.com/brand, will get 60% off your first month. Now let's look at how this was reported elsewhere by the mainstream media, not the sponsorship thing. I'm back to the news story now. Here's another mainstream media report that seems similarly outraged that the government aren't going to censor you.
Is there a reason we are saying that this is a Trump-appointed judge in particular? Is this ruling out of sorts?
I think you would be able to tell that from just reading it. I think, you would be able to correctly guess who this judge was appointed by just reading this opinion.
What he's saying there is that you can observe that this is a Trump-appointed judge by virtue of the fact that there's an interest in free speech. What the mainstream media are doing in your lifetime, observably, is turning free speech into a right-wing issue. When did that happen? Like, I'm old enough to remember when free speech was the right to support gay rights, trans rights, civil rights. What was Martin Luther King like right-wing? Was Malcolm X right-wing? Or the Stonewall protesters right-wing? Free speech, the right to free expression, whether that's because you're into trans stuff or whether you're pro-life or whether you're free speech is transcendent of that. That's the point of it. That is the point. If you say free speech, but just over here, guess what that's not? Free speech.
And the FBI side, it's something I followed really closely, and there's just not a lot of evidence that the FBI was encouraging social media companies to take down posts. And, you know, the argument, especially in the wake in the wake of January 6th, that the FBI was too synced up with Twitter or Facebook or any of these social media companies just sort of flies in the face of reality, because obviously we saw what happened on January 6th itself.
Let's break this down together. That mainstream media pundit has just claimed there can be no collusion between social media and the deep state because January the 6th happened. How could January the 6th have happened if there's collusion between the deep state and social media? They would have stopped it, is the argument that he's advancing. But those of us that have been watching independent media know that there was collusion, and in fact there were agents of the FBI, the Capitol Police, various other law enforcement agencies in that crowd. So that actually is an argument that there was collusion between social media. So that, again, is propaganda. It's more subtle and insidious propaganda than the first piece, but this one is saying January 6th is evidence that there isn't collusion. But you might say, no, January 6th is evidence that there is collusion because we know there are agents there, and we've seen subsequently that laws are being passed to give the Capitol Police more money, laws are being passed to shut down protests generally. This will be used to legitimize surveillance. Let me know what you think, though.
You know, the COVID misinformation stuff is a little bit more complicated.
Do you see how the mainstream media conveys the pandemic period and the role of the government and media in that time is this? It's a bit more complicated. A handful of words.
You know, the COVID misinformation stuff is a little bit more complicated.
Maybe we might stop and look at how it was a bit more complicated. Was it a bit more complicated because vaccine experts, pro-vaccine voices, people that invented vaccines were called anti-vaxxers and shut down? Is it true that information was censored but was verifiable? Is it true that since then the Twitter files have revealed the depth of deep state intervention and control of information? Look at how the mainstream controls that. This is their perfect opportunity. This is where NBC could say, look, we made mistakes, because remember during that period, us and affiliated ideologically comparable stations said stuff like horse paste, ivermectin, we should shut it down, these people should be ashamed. And we were damn wrong about every single bit of that. Suppose that shows you how dangerous censorship of this kind is, and that the government should step back, right? But why don't they make that point? Because they have an agenda. They want the censorship because the censorship suits them at this time. Might not in the future. At this time, the censorship suits them.
I think it was sort of to send a message on the 4th of July, right? It's not that often you get injunctions sent out on that date, and the way that this 155-page Look
at them laughing like those cynical bastards releasing that information about independent thought and independent communication on Independence Day. Is there nothing they won't stoop to? But that is a really good point. You're meant to be independent on Independence Day. That's what Independence Day is celebrating. Oh, it's terrible that time when we were controlled by those people that wouldn't listen to us and taxed us and controlled us, who were a deracinated, uprooted ruling class that, oh no, it's us now.
Judicial filing reads, it's not necessarily something that you think that, like, oh, we just happened to finish it on July 4th.
You know, I had not considered that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, Independence Day. You might want to look it up. Let's get into it a bit more deeply. The Biden administration suffered a major setback on Tuesday morning over its social media policy, but so far it appears to be pushing ahead undaunted. Oh, good. The Department of Justice announced later that day it would appeal the decision, arguing it is necessary and responsible to protect public health, safety, and security. We've already said on this channel many times, safety, security, convenience. These are the words they will use to usher in and lubricate the pathway to totalitarianism. And by totalitarianism, I mean centralized authority. Perhaps totalitarianism is not the right word, but centralized authority. Look at exactly what they're saying here. How are we to protect you and help you and keep you safe if we can't control everything?
I wonder why, while the DOJ is reviewing its options, is there any immediate day-to-day impact on the administration's activities here, the White House's activities?
So we've been very kind of consistent.
She's not been in the job that long, has she? Like maybe a year or so. Already she's showing signs of that kind of accumulative fatigue that you see public figures accrue when they have to day by day sort of stand in front of people and, if not lie, certainly give such a limited, narrow and curated perspective on reality that it takes a toll on the human soul. That person there, Karine Jean-Pierre, she's an idealistic person, but look what she's got to do every day. She's got to stand in front of people and go, what this is to protect your health. It's not about authority. We just want to protect people's health. Okay, well, can we just look at how in other areas health protection is prioritized over commerce and dominion? Let's look at that in pharmacology. Let's look at it in ecology. Let's look at it in finance. Let's look at it in public wealth management. I mean, you just list it again and again and you'll be able to say, oh no, we never ever prioritize public health over commerce and dominion. And knowing that, as she must, is exhausting to her because she's a human being.
We are going to continue to promote responsible actions to protect public health, safety, and security when confronted by challenges like a deadly pandemic and foreign attacks on our elections. So we're going to continue to do that to promote that in a responsible way.
Pandemic and foreign attacks on public elections are two areas now that show more than any two examples I could cite, except perhaps the laptop, that reveal do not censor, do allow debate. Like, that's mad that those are the examples, isn't it?
Our view remains that social media platforms have a critical responsibility to take action or to take account of the effects of their platforms are having to the American people, but make independent choices about the information they present. They are a private, as you know, entity, and it is their responsibility to act accordingly. And so we're going to continue to be responsible in that way.
This is from Brett Swanson, non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. For 3 years, pandemic public relations mocked nature, generating fear, illness, inflation, and excess death beyond what the virus caused. Digital censorship supercharged the effort to hide reality, but reality is getting its day in court. Discovery in Missouri v. Biden exposed relationships among government agencies and social media firms and revealed an additional layer of university centers and self-styled disinformation watchdogs and fact-checking outfits. Elon Musk's release of some of Twitter's internal files revealed that up to 80 Federal Bureau of Investigation agents were embedded within social media companies. The agents mostly weren't fighting terrorism, but flagging wrongthink by American citizens, including eminent scientists who suggested different paths on COVID policy. The results of these relationships? Twitter blacklisted Stanford physician and economist Jay Bhattacharya for showing COVID almost exclusively threatened the elderly, severely reducing the visibility of his tweets. That was good and vital information that would have been helpful. That's not propaganda or anti-COVID. That's helpful health data, I would argue. Let me know in the comments if you agree. When Stanford health policy scholar Scott Atlas began advising the White House, YouTube erased his most prominent video opposing lockdowns. Twitter banned Robert Malone, a pioneer of mRNA vaccine technology, for calling attention to the vaccine's dangers. Robert Malone, for me and you, that's a name we've known for ages, right? And like, hold on, isn't this guy, didn't he invent it? How can he be anti if you, like, Ronald McDonald is not anti-McDonald, is he? You can't trust Ronald McDonald. That guy hates McDonald's and is against them. YouTube demonetized evolutionary biologist Brett Weinstein, who suggested the virus might be engineered and predicted vaccine-evading variants. Came on our show. A person who was legitimately opposing government edicts because of a public health-oriented ideology and experience and knowledge. And those are only a few examples. Social media platforms were powerful tools for full-spectrum censorship, but they didn't act alone. Medical schools, medical boards, science journals, and legacy media sang from the same hymnal. Legions of doctors stayed quiet after witnessing the demonization of their peers who challenged the COVID orthodoxy. Understandably, because it's frightening to face that kind of censorship, surveillance, and the sense that you could be punished. But I suppose we should really appreciate those voices that did speak out bravely. A little censorship leads people to watch what they say. Millions of patients and citizens were deprived of important insights as a result. Their whole argument was what they were controlling and censoring was protecting people, but it wasn't doing that. It was harming people. Health authorities and TV doctors insisted young people were vulnerable, demanded toddlers wear masks, closed schools, beaches and parks, and were loath to contemplate crucial cost-benefit analysis. The economy, mental health, never heard of them. All conversations we were having, right? Let me know in the comments. These experts denied the protective effects of recovered immunity, a phenomenon we've known about since the plague of Athens in 430 BC. In a few centuries' time, there will be this fella Jesus Jesus who's going to make an impact, but we're not there yet. Let's wait for that. One thing I can tell you for sure, though, is natural immunity works well. Shut your goddamn mouth, you racist! US government spent $6 trillion to buoy its shuttered economy, and most people got COVID anyway. Worst of all, the lockdowns and mandates resulted in unprecedented bad health outcomes for young and middle-aged people in rich countries. Hooray! Excess mortality in most high-income nations was worse in 2021 and 2022 than in 2020, the initial pandemic year. It made things worse then, it suggests. Many poorer nations with less government control seem to fare better. Less government control? Better? Sweden, which didn't have a lockdown, performed better than nearly every other advanced nation. After navigating 2020 with relative success, young and middle-aged healthy people in rich nations began dying in unprecedented numbers in 2021 and 2022. Health authorities haven't focused enough on this cataclysm of premature death from non-COVID heart attacks, strokes, pulmonary embolisms, kidney failure, and cancer. I wonder why. Hiding these and other realities has become more difficult in the internet age. Could this be part of the reason for censorship? Is that why the Biden administration are demanding censorship? To continue to hide it? The information explosion has allowed more people to spot quickly the mistakes of officials and learn the truth. This has changed the relationship between the authorities and those they govern. Those in charge feel threatened. And there is the key point, and that is what the censorship is about. It's not about public health, it's about centralized authoritarian control. Digital censorship is their response to this crisis of authority. True, misinformation is rampant online. Of course it is. Anyone can write anything they want. There's all sorts of untrue, mad stuff being said. But what's interesting is the type of information that they are targeting, and in particular, the type of information that they are ignoring, and their own evident errors when it comes to erroneous information. But it was far worse before the internet, when myths could persist for centuries. New technologies allow us to compile data quickly, correct errors, find facts, and dispel falsehoods. Science, supported by an open internet, is the process by which we reduce misinformation and approach the truth. So science, not as a subset of corporate, commercial, or globalist interests, but science as a process of investigating the nature of things, what is observable and what can be deduced, is of course absolutely vital, incontrovertibly. What is also required is an open internet, which amounts to free speech and freedom of communication. It's plain that the crisis of authority is what's being addressed here, not a health crisis. The health crisis, it seems, may have been made worse by the actions they took in the last couple of years. Who knows what other blunders they're making with geopolitics, war, energy, population management, civilization. Who knows? Who could say? But I know that you'll let me know in the comments, because what I believe in is free speech, democracy, the ability to run your own life and your own community, to leave one another alone wherever possible, and to allow the speech of people you disagree with to flourish and thrive. If freedom means anything, it means that. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments below? If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. You can watch my comedy special, Brandemic. There's a link in the description to it. It's very enjoyable. We make jokes about this stuff, which now seem way ahead of their time. Thanks to you lot. Our show is on every single day at these times. Join us there, but more important than any of that is that you please stay free.